formally begin the session, may we ask Mr. Luis Pablo to read 3 of his poems from the collection.
Okay, good afternoon. So first I'm reading Mysterium Crucis, which is the first. Mysterium Crucis. Before you, I knew wood as my arms, sprouting from my island body. Brown seeds spun coconut husk, then split to brown man, brown woman. I am not a god of scripture or doctrine, but I reside in them, they in me. We saw you in the distance of white clouds, 2 pieces, one upright, as a sword piercing the sands, another outstretched, a preacher's open arms. Born on ship and fluttering wings, you were the tip of that behemoth wood, ripping the veiled sky. Light spilled on the skin of marbled demons, while they sunk our painted bodies with their anchors. We refused you at first, blood the price for keeping faith. Your weariness bore us down, blood a pact for changing it. I thought we had survived each time my children sprung on you from its scorched and salted lands, molested by zeal. Upon my feet, my daughter as virgin, her barotzaya slumped slowing off. Defiance, remembrance, on my uncrossed brow, my young brown boy, tacked to a mockery of you, his attack. Tattered before it drapes body waiting. Take these reposes, horizontals parallel to the bark of your bed, yours, your accrued gold. Headboard to foot, theirs encrusted in grime and worm. How could your face be long? Time cocoons and plods on like a mollusk, adds a spiral for every year. My children invoke your praise, a mouth decreeing your altar in halls and laws, a pair of lungs gasping for dry land in floods and fires for the unworthy, a megaphone blasting asphalt, calling a dictator to humility and holocaust. And after all these centuries, I wonder how you stay there barely clothed, drooping yet never dropping, as if the weight we took from you did nothing for your wounds. Whenever I pray for you to ease this burden we share, you point to your sternum, it whispers, our heart is suffering. Second is the lover's synecdoche. To sing your bones is to release you, long before I've even kept a single bead of sweat. Memory is a wishbone snapping, 2 clavicles engulfing the wilderness sewn between these blankets. I forget the gristle of guilt. I am nakedness of want. I am virgin's rapture. I am an account of deep exploration, drawn string of Cupid's bow, suckle on the fruit of a rounded lip, skim an incisor, film of spit, the ghost of soap haunting slope of a neck. How I have held you, wrists crossed, the nooks under your armpits, pelvis upon lumbar, the body of fear. I feel his ribcage, the uninvited partner. We, victims of solitude, on a quest to wholeness, we cause each other to glisten. And then I'm reading my last poem, which is Father's Montage. The room hushed, soft in its whiteness, divided by these blinds. Fruit at table's edge, rhythmic beat, metronome of mechanical pump. Focus on your father, smothered, colorless in these sheets. The flowers dried can leave the room. Your father is leaving on the back of a stallion, both manes rake the air. The highland breeze stings the wound you nurse from falling. You will not ride again for some time. You wonder what it's like to soar for a moment, lift up, ride on the back of his saddle. You wrinkle your nose at this room. What else can you expect of alcohol, except to keep clean? Yet there is no mud here to rise from, no horse to fall from. You look to memory for color, for a lack of dependence on machines. A sprawling beach, an hour after lunch when it is safe to swim. Your father wraps his shirt around his bare head, then charges into the waiting sea. How far can he go? The clue is rippling muscle parting the waves. His wingspan will rise from the shore. It could sweep you, and you could fly.
You can now ask the fellows to give their comments on the work of the Luis.
Train Carrion managed to email her video, and it took me a while to download, which is why I paid. We'll still watch it so everyone can benefit from her discussion of talks but she also video on this collection. Right? I just had to announce that. So when we will do it after we're done with stand-up. Right? Is that right? We'll finish everyone, and then those who might want to stay can watch and just play it.
Okay, sure.
So generally, we've already talked about it in passing with Nico. Well, I've actually really enjoyed a lot of the poems here because I'm into this. I mean, it's simple in some of its forms. I love that way it cuts in a lot of them. I just love such pretty imagery, how it works out. My issue, since a lot of people already pretty much focused on other poems, I'm just gonna focus on two for mine. My issue comes in with unlearning physics. And one of the two poems, and I'm not sure if that's the thing that you're getting, I feel as if it intellectualizes too much. I mean, I get that it's talking about physics, but the fact that it's also saying it's unlearning physics, you're going reverse, you're losing your knowledge of science. And then somehow it gets deeper and deeper and deeper for me. I find that it intellectualizes further and further, and then it doesn't unlearn physics. In fact, the way I read it, in fact, it's like it's saying physics is wrong, or you're not unlearning physics, you're changing it, or you're defying it. Well, I showed him a poem about it. It's called "Defying Physics" by Pascual Agustin that others might want to read because it tackles something similar. It does it very simply. The second poem was Father's Montage. I got the feeling reading it because I did enjoy some of the images. But I got the feeling that when you watch a montage, something tends to solidify. And I didn't really get that. Maybe that's the project, it's floating there. But I didn't really find something that grounded it for me. But that could have also been the intent of the project. So that's just my thing with those two poems. Because generally I had fun with this collection. With this week.
I'll go piece by piece before I proceed to the general comment. Everything. For Prodigal Glass, let's start with that. It reminds me of this book called Unbearable Lightness of Being. Because of a compelling exposition and how it contrasts and by extension necessitates discomfort to create comfort. Yeah, Milan Kundera, I think. I noticed that in the, I'm looking for the line in Prodigal Glass. Hold on. Only when I am pinned between another weight and mattress do I understand likeness. Only when I am completely shed breath on an ape do I unburden pleasure. I thought that was a compelling exposition, but and I didn't feel the inadequacy or the need for it to elevate the insight. I really like the piece. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this about you coming home to your mother after a hookup? Okay. In that case, though, on that note though, because earlier in the early parts of the piece, there was a reference to your mother's womb, about how whether this is how your mother expelled you from her womb. Maybe towards the end when you are coming home, you could also reference, I mean, I feel like it would have been a stronger imagery if you were able to portray yourself as sort of coming back to her womb. So to speak. So I don't know, I mean it's not necessary. I think the piece is beautiful as it is, but maybe that's something you can explore. Crush is my favorite piece, just because the tone of everything is very tender, very melodic. I like how you did not really particularly use highfalutin words, but then it sounded elevated. But then with Crush, he went back to back to basics type of poetry. it didn't intellectualize. It didn't try to ruminate on some insight that hasn't been heard of. It was simply an anecdote of several stages of your life. I'd also like to point out a favorite image for me. One line that goes, "The sunflower goes against its nature, wilts in the heat of what keeps it alive." Basically what the scene that you're defining is simply you looking at your class president's face, cherubic face, but then how you described it put so much weight in that moment, which kind of puts things into perspective, because we have to remind ourselves that this is in fact from the perspective of an 11-year-old and not really from us right now. You might look into it as, yun lang, makita mo lang yung cherubic face ng president. But ganun siya. It brings us to the time, it brings us to the moment, which I really appreciated. Overall comment, I guess the only issue I have, because I thoroughly enjoyed the collection. It was both powerful and yet tender and easy. But then my only problem, I guess, is with the titles. I mean, like, who gets the Broken Temple? Are you the Broken Temple? And are we... or I don't know. Maybe you can explain that later. But then further along with the pieces, I don't think they necessarily contributed anything to the grander narrative or to the grander, value of the poem. So I guess medyo naging roadblock pa sila, because I personally don't know a lot of the words used in the titles. And then I don't feel like they nourished the importance that the pieces brought into the collection. But other than that, it was a very lovely collection. I loved it. It was my personal favorite from the workshop. So, congratulations.
Hello. So, first I'd like to thank the poet for this collection and for allowing me the pleasure of reading it. Because I'm a reader who's really in love with images. So reading through through the poems back in Davao, it took me a long time. Not because not in the terms of understanding, but in savoring the pieces. Because there were a lot of tender moments, there were a lot of precious imagery. So I felt that it just begged to be read slowly and with so much gusto and all that. It felt very floaty to me, parang nakakalutaw at certain points. So I guess for me, I would also like certain images that would bring me back to the ground to anchor me as well, because the pieces really makes me fly. But I guess I have that sort of yearning for something more gritty at certain instances. In terms of the structure, I guess, I think there was this, I felt that the line breaks could have been perhaps more, I guess, I had some concerns with the language, with the line breaks, I mean. In the Mysterium Cruises, for example, I was very fixated in thinking why such jarred lines, why such jarred couplets, what are you trying to tell me? So there was a lot of tension in my mind, but I didn't feel the tension, or I didn't feel these line breaks being justified by the content. And I think it was in Prodigal, was it in there were certain instances wherein the line breaks felt very predictable, that it didn't add something to the movement. Like for example, a phrase and then the next line is just below it, and I felt that it could have added more if the line breaks could have been used much more potently. Overall, at a certain point, I guess I found it took a long time then as well for me to grasp all of these different imagery and to weld them together to create the situations, the narrative, I mean. But I truly enjoyed the adventure of looking into these different things. And I felt that it's very, I can feel you in the piece, so you have a very distinct voice. So reading through them, there's that consistency of that voice and that tone, which I commend, because it made me feel that I'm reading through certain instances of your life without you being very explicit that this is what's happening to me, this is about me, you need to know about me. So I like that invitation for me to get inside your world without, imposing yourself upon me. So I guess yun pa.
Hi Nico, good afternoon everyone. General observation ko lang sa suite ni Nico is ang smooth ng pacing ng poems, and then parang hindi kasi forced yung choice of words. Parang very natural lang yung pagkasulat, and you would know that the poet knows the language very well based on how it is written. And I like the poem Crush because ang tender, ang soft, kaya ang sabi nila. And then I saw myself in the persona because I think that growing up you would have several admirations, may experience mo ganun. And then ang easy lang niya basahin na parang wala siyang stop, like dire-diretso lang siya. So you would appreciate it kasi parang magigets mo talaga yung content ng poem sa first reading. And then sa Father's Montage, the second person point of view is it worked for me kasi parang it makes the poem more personal kasi parang it's just the reader and the persona, something like that. So that's just it. Yun yung mga observation ko sa Sweet Nico.
What about those guys on that side?
Hi. Well, are you familiar with New York? Well, her most recent album is entitled Utopia. There's a lot of light and air in it. And it's the thing that I see in your collection. There's a lot of lightness, there's a lot of air to it, and there's also religious influences here and imagery. And I think it shines in the first poem. See, I read this, and I see it as like a first reading in a holy mass. Like, there are sections here of couplets that read like they're from verses from the Bible, and then some few stanzas that sound like respiratorial psalms, which I enjoyed the most kasi parang nagkakaroon ng contrast dun sa mga statements nila. There's just a lot of tenderness in this collection for some reason, and like I vibe with it. Kasi parang it works like a two-way mirror na may malaking gap between you and that mirror and with the reader itself. And a comment with unlearning physics. Kasi the information that is presented in each stanza here is fine. Although physics in itself, the term is parang, it signifies the mechanisms of the universe. Kasi it was once believed na the world works like a machine sa mga ancient physicists. Yeah, okay, I'm good with the information presented here with physics terms. But I also want this is not exactly the unlearning part. I think there's going to be an addition here, a stanza, that will be the unlearning part. Probably also in the context of physics then. Something like a black hole, or something that destroys existence itself. Crush, I think, is a favorite ng karamihan dito. It's good. It is very personal, and it's vulnerable, which makes it intimate and easy to connect with. And sa last poem, sa Father's Montage, I find this more like a supercut. parang a lot of these verses, a lot of these sections are reimaginings na. And maybe I'm looking for it to be closer to you. I wanted to revert to religious imagery na nakita ko sa Mysterium Crucis. Yun lang naman.
I have already heard yesterday from panelists. So when we write love poems, we should give it something first. Ako naman, I would suggest when we write love poems, we want to give them what is the best. And I think this is the perfect example. I also grew up in the backyards of the church, and this is one of the challenges that I am facing. How do I write poems, especially if I am an advocate of LGBT, if I am in the church? It's one of the challenges. So one of my, I think I was able to conquer that kind of problem. Is I had to, I don't know if it's biased on the part of the LGBT, I had to play it safe. I had to make sure that I will still be able to stay in the sense that I'm respected as a church person. At the same time, I'm able to deliver the things that I'd like to say in the poem. In Mysterium Crucis, I was able to reflect into a lot of things, like I was looking at the images, just how it was presented in the poem, and I like it as it is. The very tranquil tone of the poems, and syempre, crush. All of us. And I don't have anything to comment about in the poems. The sweet for me is just exactly as it is.
Hi, Nico. The most trans-worthy face sa group na to, the most beautiful face for a trans woman. So let me just say that what I love about the collection is that it totally reflects the physique or how the author actually looks like. It's floral. It's mabango. The collection. So just to share an anecdote on flowers.
Have you been sniffing?
Looking at there's a sort of air of.
Okay, you said it's like both the author and the collection are free that.
Sort of. There's a certain air of something. Just to share, when Ricardo TC entered Givenchy in 2012, Grace Coddington had an interview with W Magazine because Givenchy was, John Galliano left Givenchy for Dior. And then when he entered, para people were sort of not so sure if Ricardo TC is the right person for Givenchy. But then again, Grace Coddington said something about flowers and skeletons, which I totally saw in most of your text. It's anatomic, it's floral. I saw a lot of clavicles and sternum. Sabi ni Grace Coddington, flowers are nothing but perfumed skeletons. They both narrate tragedies. The flowers narrate the tragedies for the bee who pollinated it, and of course the skeletons narrate, of course, tragedies if it's a carcass or if it's a soko or something, things like those. That's what I saw here. The broken temple, it's kind of a tragic metaphor that shows an air of fragrance to it, as seen in the sort of colonial critique for Mysterium Crucis. Of course, brown man, brown woman, and then the coming of the church, and then, of course, the prodigal glass, which I found was sort of sad because the idea of prodigal glass is you feel bad after an anal sex, which for the LGBTQ, it's something that you would want to be sort of romanticized kasi anal sex is, you know, parang Catholic girl, parang gano'n. Because, sabi dito, mother, do not learn the city, you will not bear the view of his plate, threadbare and thin, across the hands of a stranger. So parang he feels sorry about the breath of the top guy in his nape. So parang ganon. And of course, my favorite is Lovers in It to Key. Especially loved the last line, we victims of solitude on a quest to wholeness, we cause each other to glisten. Of course, that's Paris. That's Pawis. And of course, everybody loves Pawis, especially if it's maalat. So overall, that's what I can say. It's fragrant in a sense that it evokes feelings of tragedy, but there's a certain air of hope to it, because there's a coming of age piece on crushes and so there. So I guess very nice, ganda.
Pag binabasa ko yung mga tula ni Nico, parang siyang katulad dun sa nagaslas ng tubig. Totoong parang ang ganda ng pagkalaylay or pagkagamit ng mga salita, pagkagamit. Gamay na gamay yung wika. At yun lang. It's a yes for me.
Hi Nico, what I like about your collection is that it incorporates a lot of elements. It has science, you have physics, there's anatomy, then you have religion, you have crucifix, then there's mythology, you have Cupid and Venus, and then there's the personal as well. And well, it covered a lot of themes. Para siyang variety show na may utak at puso. Mga UP, utak at puso. So maganda siya. And favorite ko din yung Crush, primarily because it's easy to read. And yeah, relatable. But I also love Prodigal Gas kasi I'm wondering, why are you thinking of your mother? Well, you're breaking up with someone. Do you have mommy issues? Parang gano'n. Yun lang naman. So I just wonder. Okay, you can answer me later.
Okay, we can now ask the panelists to share their comments on the collection.
Well, Nico was my student in an MA poetry class, and the project was born in that class, I would say. So I had a hand in it. I was probably a midwife of a sort. The project is interesting because it's going to try to confess. It's a confessional collection, but he's also, confess is a good term because it's a Catholic concept, and it's proper because it's going to talk about his Catholic upbringing, but also he's going to bring into that project his own identity as a self-aware gay man, which of course it's the key word there is self-aware, because there are many gay men in the Catholic religion. Some of them actually are ministers of that religion, or even like in the hierarchy of that religion, but we can't say they're self-aware. Nico is very self-aware. And so how do you reconcile both, when in fact common sense tells us that they're irreconcilable? The Catechism officially calls homosexuality a disorder, and the Church has been sort of, well, we have a Pope who vacillates on the issue. He's very strategic. He's making baby steps. We know, we can tell he's actually progressive, but he can only do so much. So he would say these nice pro-gay things, but then in the next instance he would take them back or say something equally just bad, or worse. But there's progress under this papacy. I think we've seen some progress. But that's not his project. He's not going to do a theological collection. He's actually going to do this is probably post-confessionalism already. It's not confessionalism proper, because I think that movement ended with the death of Sexton and all these great confessionals. No? everyone after them who's still doing confessional writing has taken confessionalism into different directions. And I think what makes your project interesting is that you're going to temper the confessional, well, you're going to prevent confessionalism from turning into this sort of like exhibitionist, sort of like unbosoming of pain and trauma and shame. Because you're going to temper that with intelligence. And so you're bringing into this sort of project this metronomic oscillation between anecdote and commentary, between confession and rumination, right? You're going to have myth, you're going to have religion, you're going to have science, you're going to have, what else? What other things in the collection? Film, you're going to bring cinema, yes, and fashion and things, and the arts, with the telling of a life. So we understand that this is actually not just pure, unbridled self-indulgence, right? Each poem demonstrates actually the sort of the potential of the confession, the post-confessional work, because you're actually in each poem already complicating confessionalism and doing something different. The Mysterium Crucis, I think, is the most sort of adventurous piece here in terms of concept, because it actually isn't so much you yet. There's no confession here, strictly speaking, because it's a dramatic monologue. You invent a persona who is the pagan god, the pre-colonial pagan god, talking to the crucifix, right? To the Christian god, and narrating the story of the arrival of this religion into the Philippines, right? And in the end, you're actually saying, we've borne so many of the burden, right? Why are you still suffering? And then the Christ figure, and this is the ambivalence that you have. It's so easy to just abandon Catholicism and just reject it, like so many gay men have done, who are completely turned off with it, you know? Like Ronald, well, not just Catholicism, Ronald grew up evangelical and he's abandoned it completely because, you know, he fire and brimstone and all the talk on abomination and damnation, just too much, right? But you can't do it, right? And this is the wonderful thing in your project, is that you are at the same time rejecting the intolerance of this religion. You're actually also embracing the religion. So you will have that wonderful, your collection will speak to the ambivalence that is felt by many Catholics who still want to remain Catholic and be confidently gay and unapologetically gay. So you are actually going to speak for them in this collection, right? And that's a big burden to bear. But there are others who borne it. Louis John Sanchez, who was here for another reason last night, right? I did ask him to come precisely for this reason, that this collection would be taken up today. He has a book, pagkahaba-haba naman ng posisyon or something. These are personal essays. He's very gay, but also very Catholic, and wrote even for Catholic publications and things like that. How has he been able to do it? He writes in Filipino, can you imagine? Okay. There are others doing it. So many teachers in Ateneo are very gay, and they're still there. You know, I've done it myself. I'm actually also thinking about these issues. But I'm dwelling more in my work on spirituality, which you're not yet actually doing. It's still religion you're sort of talking about. Maybe some of the poems can actually go to the spiritual, where if you start thinking things from the perspective of spirituality, then religion and the art and poetry actually are all the same. They're all metaphorical attempts to grasp at mystery and understand mystery, grapple with mystery. And in that sense, not one approach is better than the other. You know? There are many paths to the divine, and one of them is art, right? And the other one is religion. You know? The other one is mythology. The other one is the feminine. Okay, and the best one is the Dark Night of the Soul. I don't recommend it. It's a path to the divine. It's basically a major existential crisis, right? Which people who emerge from that dark night of the soul do discover spirituality, or they don't, meaning they're crushed by that dark night. The Prodigal Glass, it's taking off, trying to sort of riff off the idea of the prodigal son, I think, right? The idea of being prodigal because you are not exactly being a perfect child. by agreeing to be bottom or top. Sorry. But yeah, the speaker is a bottom, and there's all the reason to identify with the mother. Then you understand, Stan, naman, it's common sense, right? You're getting topped, so you would think of the mother, right? It's the same position, right? But I like that. That's the same tension of of trying to hold on to your Catholic faith and being gay, right? Trying to sort of hold on to the idea of your family and being aware that you're actually betraying the family somehow because you're liking sex too much. Okay? What else? The one that we wrote in our class is Crush, and this is now the evolved, finished version. But this is the best version of it. Okay? I have no problem here. It's so clear. There's a clarity throughout. You know, that's Nico's strength, right? You never get lost. Never get lost. The images are actually progressing at the right pace. There is unity, you know, in each poem. The one that's least unified is Father's Montage. There's certain dreaminess to it. May mga dream sequence siya. Meron siyang magical element, yung the stallion and all of that. But this is probably the most tender piece here, actually. It's trying to capture the complexity of the relationship between the gay son and the father, and doing so through vignettes and fragments. And we know that the father has died, right? And the son loves the father. But how do you say that, you know? And this is the approach that was, or the strategy that Nico adopted, to do so through little memories and little objects and images, no? Very few images, no? And very effective, I would say. The end, of course, is nice because you see the love there. You know, the father did teach the son how to be strong, and the son is able to fly because the father set the example. So we're going to probably see some more sort of like a few more poems about family. You know? So that's another element in the collection: family, growing up, desire, the body. And learning physics is interesting because you're actually being a little nerdy and sort of showing off your knowledge of some science. But if you subject it to a strictly scientific analysis, then it's going to fail because there are certain misunderstandings of what these scientific principles are about, but that doesn't matter, right? We're in the hands of a poet here. I mean, we're not learning physics here. We're actually being told how physics can be sort of used metaphorically in poetry, you know, and you only get an aspect of it. You cannot use the whole of it. Right? By the way, poetry and science, they are similar things, you know, and the similarity has to do with the concept of paradox, which of course in poetry we actually encounter all the time. Each poem is supposed to actually have a paradox in it. And the best example of that is a metaphor in a poem. A paradox is a contradiction of sorts, and a metaphor is one thing being another thing. It's a little strange, right? In science, the paradox is known as the equation. And the best paradox of the last century is E equals mc squared. Energy and matter becoming one. Right? That's a poem there. It's a poem at the heart of that equation. And so there is a lot, I think, there are a lot of poetic ideas that we can actually get from science. So, and this is a wonderful example of that. So there are grammar lapses, Nico, like, I don't understand, like probably, okay, spin, the past tense, is the same as its past participle, spun. So it's not spinned, it's not span. But sink, the past tense is sank, not sunk, right? That's forgivable. May isa pa eh, or dalawa pa. Okay? Alright, so yeah, we can sit down and actually go through those, no? May mga punctuation remarks din ako. So that's it, no? And I look forward to working with you and fleshing that out, the whole collection out. We'll call it Broken Temple pa rin. Yeah, why not? The religion thing is there, and then the temple of the body, you know, which has been broken and shattered again and again because you've been top like over and over. Yeah, that would break any temple, right? I'm kidding, Nico. This is confession and sin. The I is not the same as the author, right? For all you know, Nico is like one view, like one relentless top. Okay. There's nothing wrong about top or bottom. These are just positions. Okay. Thanks. I am like everyone else gratified by the poems and very happy to read them. Smack dab in the middle of LGBTQ territory. There's no need to interpret, no need to come up with any kind of difficult queer reading. We are in the middle of this, okay? Poem after poem, that is the spirit, right? And we look forward to more of this. Thank you.
What's next? Okay, just a few words left. But next is Jam. I'm ready na ready. Okay. Should I? Okay. Just a few ano lang. I like how the poet manages to explore Catholicism, because it's basically that from the very beginning. But in the process, he also infuses it with different discourses, like physics, what else, psychoanalysis. I mean, I'm not so sure if it's conscious of that. Film, right? I particularly like Pablo because of the because while you're pinned down like that, you're thinking of your mom. It's a very tender poem for me, right? An identification with a mother, perhaps, or maybe wish to return to the womb. These other things that you can actually bring to the fore in the reading of this tender poem. I also like the father poem, especially the rippling muscle. I mean, there's this gaze. Gaze is very appears here a lot, and there's this duration of the father, the male figure. What else? Yeah, I find that the montage very tender. But in terms of, I also love the learning physics. Despite the concepts of physics that I think can still be restored. Okay, I like the ending. To expect magnitude from a single body. I think you can forgive the poet for the not black, but for his deployment of physics in a certain way. But the line, has gravitas. So I like those two lines. Okay. For an example on how to utilize physics or things like matter or whatever, I would suggest that you read a poem by one of our friends, the late Sid Gomez Hildawa. His poem is In Absentia. In Absentia. So how the beloved actually leaves traces, defined in terms of physics. It's a lovely poem. I look for a copy, and I'll send it to you. Para makita mo how he utilizes physics, or how he utilized physics in his poetry. I am not sure about the lineation in this collection. I think that's something that you may need to consider. Kasi parang abrupt din. For instance, there's a poem here, the first one, page 61, How could your face be long? I don't know if this 6 words merit 2 lines. Feeling ko kulang siya, Parang feeling ko kulang na, kailangan ng couplets eh. Okay, expand ko nga yung linya. Parang feeling, yun yung mga ganung mga choices kailangan natin tingnan, And then yung Barot Saya, I'm not so sure, kasi may post-colonial dimension, di ba? I don't know if Barot Saya works here. Kasi kung native, ang trope mo, or ang image mo, bakit bagot saya? Yan, bagot saya, kailangan I don't think, yung sa page 60, the Mysterium, parang hindi, baka hindi yun, no? Maybe something else. So yun, then, I also want you to explore the punctuation marks. May isa pang tula na masyadong, for instance, on page 66, I learned the second new stanza. Seventh line. I learned what risk looks like instead. I don't know if that's the proper, is it M dash, N dash, what is it that you really want? No? And I suggest that you actually play with those punctuation marks. No? Baka kailangan yun for certain effects in your poetry. What else? There's tenderness here, and there's a mind that's mulling over things. You don't mull over it, contemplating. There's when at the end of once the collection has been revised, you really see a fully realized Catholic collection. Diba? Feeling ko lang no? na sabi ni Dr. Lopria, may self-reflexivity. And that's good because you don't need to abandon religion or spirituality. But they're two different things. No? And I think this collection is on its way to doing it successfully. Congratulations. Now maybe ask Dr. Teodoro for his comments.
I like points that would explore science and then use the vocabulary from the exact sciences in poetry. And I studied human anatomy a long time ago, kaya nire-review ko sa mind ko yung the things that I can still remember. And in the Lover's Anecdote, there's a mention of wishbone, snapping. And I learned from comparative vertebrate anatomy, I think there's a wishbone sa chicken. I'm not so sure if it's clavicle, because when you say clavicle, it's the bone here. Sternum is somewhere here. So anyway, hindi naman kaya yung comment ko. I would like to focus my comments on Father's montage, which for my done. This is also my favorite poem in the collection, especially if you have problem with your father. I think this is a type of poetry that not exactly I would love to read, but I will read because it forces me to face my own issues with my father. So that's why I can relate to it. So and because it's a montage, so true enough, the poem is really a series of four montage, four pictures. Like for the first part, the one, so here the father is sick, and then the second one, the father is healthy, the father is not younger, and then riding a stallion, and I think it's a father from the point of view of a sissy child, who can ride the horse properly, and probably traumatized by it. And then three, again, the poem would bring us back to the room where the father is sick. And then the fourth one is just perfect because here the father is not only healthy again, but also powerful. In fact, applying to the sea. And I like about the clue is rippling muscle, the parting ways, because this is a gay son seeing his father as a man. So in the whole poem, there's two pictures of father. So one, the first one, the man as desirable. That sometimes, because we rarely look at our father as a sex object or someone, a man who it's possible for us to make love to them. So because it's a terrible thing to think. But the poem gives us the opportunity to to confront that, that yeah, indeed, our fathers are also men, and just realized. So personally, I just noticed that. Well, I think I fell in love with 3 men who looks like my father. When my father was young. I mean, look at the picture, oh my God, parang itsura ng mga lalaki na inam ko, ano pa yung tatay ko nung bata. So, and then the father as man, as in vulnerable, to time, that's why the father is sick, because the human body is like that. True to the theme, the whole collection, about interrogating Catholicism, from the lens of gay poetry. So the consistent yung image of the body, as the broken temple, and also, but the poem ends with the note on the body as a temple that will bring us to heaven. So I am flying. So I love the whole collection.
Okay. Well, I listen to everybody, and I agree with certain things, but I want to start with I think somebody said, I forgot, like Broken Temple. If Neil didn't explain it, I wouldn't know what the collection was about. So, what holds the collection together under this particular title, Broken Temple? But listening to Neil, I see that it's a promising project. Although I kind of caution the writer with the many subjects that can possibly be explored here. I mean, of course there are a whole lot of subjects and themes that you're going to be exploring, but something will have to hold the collection together somehow. And I was thinking maybe it's the use of form, but or looking at the poetic line, because there are 2 things used here, the couplet, and you have free verse. But when you use the couplet, I agree with Mariel that I couldn't find the tension, or parang I was trying to feel the particular tension of the 2 lines, and I didn't get that sense, right? And the free verse is instinctive. So I see how instinctive your line cutting is, but how about more than instinct, right? Like I don't know, like some syntax, how are you going to play, or when are you going to subvert that enjambment, right? So I'll just look at the poems individually, because I can't seem to string them together. They are different confessions. When we look at the first, just a few suggestions, because many suggestions were already given. For the first poem, I was wondering if you could play with the form, because I noticed the different pronouns here, we, you, I, you, sounds like many voices. And these many voices, although like Neil had said that it's a pagan god and the Christian god, but there is the I am not the God of the scripture, then there is the we saw you in the distance. It feels like there's a chorus happening. And then balik sa, and then we refused you at first. And then upon my feet, right? My daughter, then on my uncrossed brow, my young brown boy. And but if you play with the lines and bring out multiple voices, the poem might become richer. Yeah. But I want to also commend this wonderful writer beside me for the way that he ends his poems. Diba? Like, he just fabulously ends his poems like, pak! Nandiyan na, okay, I don't need anything else. Diba? Pero meron akong isa. Page 66. I wonder if the writer would try to just end with, oftentimes I cannot cross the threshold, period. Yun lang. I mean, pero that's the only bone to pick there. Diba? And when we look at I love, lovers, synecdoche, ayan, good lines there. I was wondering if you like to try expanding the I am, like to full climax, diba? Like I am, but it's wonderful as is. Also, so my comments are mostly yung expansion, prodigal glass. There are two, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think it's the 6th stanza. So when you say there are 3 onlys here, right? So either I was wondering if you could expand it, right? Or you could also like rein it in. Your choice, but it's wonderful. Ayan, Crush, I have heard, is the most workshop of the poem. So my only concern probably is the 12-year-old, because the 12-year-old doesn't seem to sound like a 12-year-old. Diba? A classmate walks up to me, impish grin, hey, do you do this, blah, blah, blah. Then suddenly there's the kiss, the bronze god, kissed by the creator, that entire thing. Then we return to this beautiful naivete, 15, 16, 17, just beautiful. This is a wonderful poem. Okay, Father's montage. Nothing to say about that. Wonderful 3 stanzas to end with, right? So thank you for this collection.
Can we hear from Shane? Yes. Oh, meron history. Meron.
So the English one.
Yeah. No, the reason for Tom's video not having been emailed earlier is that she exceeded the time I gave her, which is maximum of 10 minutes. So she had to do another video to make it shorter. She had so much to say. No, but the one we're going to show is a short now. Yung starting ano niya lagi,
in this collection, Broken Temple, most of the poems are already written very well. I feel we also tie together as a collection, beginning with a gesture at origin, land, the changes that happen from indigenous times to post-colonial. The poems in the middle altogether have a general sense of motion or being in transit in life. And then the last poem is about so much farther, which also makes us think of origin. And in the last part of this last poem, there is a possibility of flying, again, implying motion and transit. What makes these poems, to me, glisten is the way they make us sense a truth over and beyond the real, if you know what I mean. In Lover's Synecdoche, for instance, we sense the gesture towards something larger than sex and desire. The line, it is about sex and desire, but also at the same time, something larger than it. The line cuts of this poem might initially appear awkward, such as, say, the first and 6th lines, but I feel these line cuts work because they give a sense of risk and uncertainty, which is a context in this piece. I especially find the 2nd stanza precise and skillful rendering of thoughts through word choice, line cut and enjambment. There is the certainty, the unapologetic boldness in the tone of the speaker. The list in the third stanza is also successful because it is clearly, carefully chosen. In a particular order, it seems to draw a scene which in another way is repeated in the fourth stanza. The final scene is wonderfully ambiguous and it ends on a high note, something I admit I have a preference for. Prodigal Glass, my first reaction was, wow. Like, man, why are you submitting this for a workshop? Just gonna go and have this published, you know? This poem has the clarity achieved through indirectness and gives another kind of light to re-experience what can easily be a too familiar situation. The poem reiterates but also rewrites various texts, a number of things culled from religious contexts. In this way, the poem successfully blurs conventional conceptions of or conventional constructs of the sacred and the profane, even the strong and the vulnerable. The line cuts work very well, especially in the 8th and 9th lines, as well as in the 12th and 13th lines. The parceling of ideas per stanza is also successful. I like how the poem invokes the mother. In this way, the poem is a turn away from a flat, patriarch-centered prodigal son story and instead calls in other associations, possibly more nurturing. The poem Crush, pretty brave, especially when it is read through an autobiographical lens. Something I think I won't be that brave, but this means the author is very brave. The sunflower mentioned twice in the second stanza, do they mean different things? Maybe it's just me. I find it a little confusing. In the poem Father's Touch, the words mothered in the third stanza might not be the best word. It makes me think of smothering someone with a pillow, like in the movies or in a teleserie. The one point to me that made a little more work is Mysterium Crucis. The timeline scope of this piece is wide. It covers centuries. I think the writer is able to sustain a tone throughout the poem because of the short length of the lines, the couplets, the abundance of white space. I wonder if the writer has explored the possibility of removing punctuations while still keeping capitalizations. The sense, you know, when there are no punctuations, it gives a sense of fluidity, something that keeps on and on. Capitalizations give the signal that there's a group of ideas. Also, the 19th stanza, part of the 20th as well as the 24th and the 25th, they're rather vague. I like the sounds drooping and dropping set side by side, though I'm not sure if the word drooping is the best word to use in the context. There's ambivalence in the penultimate and last stanzas. Is it the sternum that whispers? Is it the land itself who is the speaker? who prays to the you being the one who is first described in the fourth and fifth stanzas, and who somehow metamorphosed into the god and the crucifix in the later part of the poem. I'm a little confused. Still, I like the poem for the wide ambit of its project.
Other comments? Or shall we now?
No, I want to say that the most ambitious piece is the first one. And it's where actually the mannerisms that you find throughout, they are not there. The first piece is doing something different, very adventurous, very different. How do you summarize Philippine history in poetry, and focusing in particular on the question of religion and what harm it has done to indigenous spirituality, to the indigenous population. The cross is a universal archetype, and so it is, in fact, the speaker actually situates it. There was already a kind of indigenous idea of that, of verticality, the movement towards transcendence, but also inclusivity and embrace, which is the horizontal beam of the cross, right? So this is the divine, and this is the temporal and the human, right? And it's one in a cross. So in the rewriting of it, this is the first time I've seen it, Nico. It looks relatively new kasi marami pang mga mistakes nga, di ba? It was pointed out, this is where you have a lot of room for improving punctuation, improving lineation, improving word choice even, right? But, like Shane says, I encourage this, and maybe more of it, more such poems where you have this, the raising of the stakes and the upping of the ante, and you know, basically flexing of the muscles, right? Because the other poems are in the comfort zone already. You understand this is where he writes and how he writes. Now this one is different and can be done more, I think, throughout the collection. So wonderful, Nico. Congratulations. Now let you speak.
I'm so overwhelmed, but thank you for all those comments. I think what benefits me most and what gives me courage from hearing all the comments was what I said in the first day, that I do have a comfort zone, and Ternil knows that very well, what that looks like. So Mr. Crucis was something I wrote in another class, actually, Chingby's class, but there was so I wanted to challenge myself in that sense, but I wanted to keep the project that I was going on, so I wanted to see how I could reconcile that. But I'm saying the courage, because experimentation in poetry is not something that I do very often. So with all those suggestions with form and enjambment and titles, enjambment and titles are really my fear. so it's something that I should play with, I think. And hearing all those suggestions, I'm excited to see this collection that I've seen so many times in a new light. So thank you.
Tea break? No. Break. Can we watch Tom's video now?
By the library.
It's here. I think so, while we're having coffee. It's a bit anticlimactic. Tom, are you alright? I was the shy, babalik na naman siya. I have to guide you. Maybe have put it in a folder, I'm not sure. Pictures can start. Yes,
My lower back is feeling I stand.
it's
Are you? No.
Ready ka na?
Wow, sabi na hawon mo ako.
Ready na si Venezuela.
Happy na sa wala ba ako?
Don, we'll do the video now while we're having merienda. That's fine. Before we start. Para yung language flow pareho na rin.
Get the dark shirt.
Hi. So this one is about the collection, A Question of Memory. I think one trouble about writing, in this case, poetry, is that for the written word to sparkle, the writer has to come out fully into the sharp light. You can't, a word can't sparkle without the light, which can mean a spotlight of attention, both affirmative and not, which can also mean being out in the open and vulnerable, to be misread, even to be read spot on. The persona in our poems, they are masks behind which we hide ourselves, but also where we show ourselves, because after all the games we try to play, and there is an element of playing in poetry, at the end of the day, what we create is of us. Every work of art is an explicit public manifestation of what is personal and private, and therefore true. However, we choose the form or the style of this manifestation. In other words, I feel the author of the collection might need to be a little more brave. The poems in the present state, they can't sparkle because they're not receiving enough light. There is too much, I feel, holding back, which I understand, because drawing from one's memory and giving it flesh through words is not easy. I recognize there's got to be some truth, not necessarily real, in the narratives which some of the poems in the collection imply, such as the visit to the abandoned farmhouse where the family used to be happy. The succeeding poems, they also have something in common. The separation of lovers, of the lover from his beloved, not just physically, but also emotionally, so that even though they are together, they are only in a temporary truce, just because there are more pressing, urgent things to attend, like natural disasters that is happening in the moment. There is loss in these poems, heartbreak, often shown to us in the forms of natural calamity of such magnitude as to involve the whole world, implying the world of the lover. That is, there's an earthquake, a storm in an ocean, physical death. He is always being left behind by a departing ship. Interestingly, and I find this somehow hopeful, the last piece, A Captain's Memoir, calls to mind, I remember Henley's Invictus. In our poem, though, the surviving lover moves through and will weather alone, it seems, the storms in his life, as though to say, I am the captain of my soul. This is not to say, I don't mean that the captain's memoir has already sparkled in its current form. I'm always saying there's a potential there that the author might like to think about. My notes for remembering the farm is long, but let me try to shorten it here. From the get-go, in the first and second stanzas, the poem already raises suspicion in terms of credibility, and credibility is what we need as a writer who makes the speaker in a poem, only because we have to draw in the reader and take the reader where we want him or her to go, and so the reader has to trust us. The description in the first stanza makes me wonder about the farm, like how large it is, if there are oranges and apples and pears and other fruits. Also, the time when the poem is happening is also confusing. Oranges and apples, for instance, are of different seasons. Oranges in the summer, apples in the fall. Because the poem uses the word fall, it should be capital F, by the way. It uses fall and not autumn. We can assume the setting is not in the Philippines and not in Europe. How does this play in understanding the poem or in appreciating the poem? Also, do you need to mention, how badly do you need to have a tuning in that poem? In the third stanza, the words smashed plates and shattered glass imply a degree of violence which diminishes the teacups because the teacups are merely chipped. This poem, Remembering the Farm, is also rather top-heavy. In other words, the first stanza seemed to have more attention from the writer. If the plan were to indirectly tell about the conflict, about the family, through the descriptions of the farmhouse, I feel as a reader still left in the dark, which again, by the author, I feel might need to be a little more brave in giving more details. Try shifting the weight of the attention of in giving details towards the latter part of the piece. I feel there's something there in the fifth stanza. In the moment, though, it's too repressed. In an orchestra of country ghosts, the tone of the speaker carries the point. The form shows a double suppression, suppressed thoughts, but also a double telling. I find the form well, showing a thought folded within a thought, a whisper within a whisper. Also, the idea of ghosts as enduring presence or trace definitely works in this poem. The orchestra of tremors starts strong, picks up in the fourth stanza. There's a beautiful line there, but loses steam in the fifth stanza. The form in Departure is an example of what I mentioned as a possibility of dropping punctuation marks to give a sense of fluidity and using capitalizations as a mark or a signal for a group of ideas. This is also an example, this piece, of how a writer can manipulate, literally, the body of a reader, forcing the reader's eyes to move to a certain direction constantly and using this movement as part of experiencing the poem. You notice the sudden resting of the eyes back. from the far left, from the far right to the far left margin for the final cut. The title is a little heavy-handed, like saying the obvious. Is a poem truly about departure, or is it about having to leave someone or being left behind? In A Story of a Boat, I feel the poem wants to immediately operate on a metaphorical level. I'm not sure it's the best idea to do so. The form gives a sense of being in disarray and indecisive. Finally, I find the poem For Sale, A House Newly Built, as a poem about being inside the process of mourning and mourning grief. It's a tough theme because it's supposed to hurt for real the body of the reader. The reader has to almost literally experience it. We cry, we hold our breath. To write a piece on mourning and going through and surviving grief, I feel as an author, one has to go into that experience, vicarious or otherwise, down the deep well of vulnerability and grief so inconsolable, you drown on dry land. At least to me, that is when one writes a poem on mourning. So this collection, A Question of Memories, sets up some demands from the author.
But that was a break. So we're waiting for Miranda sa amin. So yeah, we'll wait for Miranda.
3:30 po yung next session. So, rest and take a break lang. Then snacks will be brought here in 10 minutes. Thank you. Sorry po na delay yung kitchen.
We apologize for the
Pala.